We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, praiseworthy and beneficent bestower of bounties. And we ask our Lord Most High to send copious and unlimited and eternal blessings and salutations upon our beloved Prophet, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Amma ba'd. So we'll continue from where we left off, inshallah last week. Firstly though, before we do that, we just renew our intentions inshallah and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us that ikhlas, that sincerity of intention that inshallah will mean that our deeds are accepted by Him, and then inshallah that we benefit from the knowledge that we learn inshallah and that others benefit from the knowledge that we have bismillah. So, قال رسول الله وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام ليس منا من لم يرحم صغيرنا ويوقر كبيرنا ويأمر بالمعروف وينهى عن المنكر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the one who is not compassionate to our young and respectful to our elders and who does not enjoin good and forbid evil is not one of us.
So this is one of the I suppose one of the seminal prophetic hadiths, a hadith, meaning that it's the hadith nabawi, as the ulama call it, the guidance of prophethood in the sense of this hadith, and the sense of the meaning of this hadith is very profound. It has a deep meaning on so many different levels. So he says, "Laysa minna." That person who does not do these things is not from us. Is not a part of us. Is not from the sunnah of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. Is not from the group, the millah, as it's also called, the group of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. So it's a big thing. At the tabarruq, the Prophet ﷺ saying, I'm free from you. I don't have any responsibility towards anyone who doesn't act in this particular way. So it doesn't mean the person is not a Muslim, of course. That's not what it means. I mean, this is not the way of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. So, مَنْ لَمْ يَرْحَمْ صَغِيرَنَا. So in terms of the meaning of the hadith, generally it refers to age. Okay, whoever, in other words, is more senior and doesn't have empathy, doesn't have mercy, doesn't forgive, in other words, doesn't go easy on those that are younger than him or her, then that's not the way of the Prophet of Allah. And it's fundamental in this society. The Prophet of Allah when he used to see the young boys, like in the Arabs, if someone with Arabs love tafkhim, like you make a big deal out of that person. They say, oh, Abu so and so, the father of so, he's not the father, he's a little kid, but he makes it feel good, makes him feel happy. In Aussie culture, it's the opposite. In Australian culture, matey, buddy, that's how we talk. So we do tasghir, we make it more smaller rather than larger. So that's the difference between the cultures, but the meaning is the same. The meaning is the same. And the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, if he saw children, young people anywhere, and he used to carry sweets, used to carry things and give them to the kids to make the kids happy. One time, one of the young girls used to work in the houses, the housemaids, I suppose, very young, only 8 or 9 years of age. She had some errands to run, and she saw the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, and she said to the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, I got some errands, will you come along? And she grabbed him by his index finger, and the Imam of all the Anbiya, the Khatam al-Nabiyyin, the seal of all the prophets, the ultimate Prophet ﷺ, and he was the judge at the time, he was the ruler at the time, he was the general at the time, he was the peacemaker, the mediator, all these things at the time. And of course he was the Prophet of Allah, the spiritual guide. Yet what did he do? He went around with this little girl, and then they ran their errands. And then so much so that when she got to the home where she was working, so to speak, more of like a slave girl, she was running late because she was with the Prophet of Allah way beyond schedule. So she asked the Prophet of Allah to give salam to the people of the house so that she wouldn't get in trouble for being late. And so that's how his demeanor was, alayhi salatu wasalam. That was his akhlaq, that was his character, that was his conduct. So that was with those that are younger, because in the society, this is the tarbiyah, this is the rearing the Prophet is teaching us so that society sticks together. Because if we're going to be harsh on young people, if we're not going to be patient and teach them, how are they going to learn? If we expect them just instantaneously to know what's happening, it's not going to happen. So that's why the rahmah has to be there. So they make mistakes or whatever. We say, don't worry, this is how you do it. Oh, it's all right, everyone makes mistakes. You know, this is how you learn in life. So this is why it's one of the seminal ahadith, one of the fundamental ahadith. Well, وَيُوَقِّرْ كَبِيرَنَا. Now, tawqir is not just to respect, it's like tajleel, which means to immensify or magnify a person, make significance of that older person. So make a big deal, basically, in local language, colloquial language. If you see an older person, make a big deal. Because especially for the Muslims, not just for the Muslims, but in particular for the Muslims, because they've lived their life, you know, whatever, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, whatever years, bita'atillah, in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas myself maybe a little bit different to you guys, I'm getting on that age group, but yourselves, whatever it might be, 20, 25, whatever, 27, 28 years. Whereas they've been double or triple the amount of years, and inshallah they've been in the obedience of Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's significant. That's the essence of why we do it. That's the essence of why the tajleel, to signify them. So that means that we don't walk, if they reach the doorway together, as an example of the things we should do, that we don't go in before them. If we're sitting in a gathering, particularly of knowledge, that we let them sit at the front. That these types of things, that we make it be, oh, it's so-and-so, they've come in the door. So-and-so's here, oh, fantastic, you know. Come in, everyone can stand up and give them the best seat. Especially the more senior they are. And afwan, grey hair is a sign of waqur. Afwan, it's a sign of wisdom. It's a sign of intelligence and one moving along in age, as the case might be. So, and again, this brings the community together rather than, and look, some people, they're sick, that's it, they've got to go to a nursing home or they've got to go to some sort of a respite care facility. But that's not the tawqir the Prophet's talking about. If someone's ill and they can't be managed at home, they need a full-time nurse or whatever the case might be, that's something different. But it's the scenario where people, they've had enough of the old people, and unfortunately, in the society we live in generally, when you're 70, that's it, you've had your use. I think judges are forced to retire at 75, I think that's the age from memory. So once they hit 75, that's it. But that wasn't the case in the time of the Prophet of Allah. That's not the case amongst the Muslims. It was those people that their mashwara, their consultation was important. And in all traditional cultures, the elders. Look at the Aboriginal culture today. They have the uncles and aunties. What a great system. You know, all the uncles, they're the ones who have been around for a long time, and they're the ones who give welcome to country. They're the ones, and we should do that actually. I'm always remiss of me. You're here, we ask you to do it, inshallah. SubhanAllah, good timing. Give welcome to country, yeah, please. We forgot, it's remiss of me every time I say we're going to do it, and we never do it. Tadl, loud voice so it can be heard, inshallah.
So, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and pay our respects to elders past and present on which this lesson takes place. Jazakumullah khair.
We'll try every week, inshallah, to do it. If I forget, please let me know, because it's important, you know, that we respect, again, subhanAllah, respect the people of the land. And I encourage each and every one of you that if you meet these elders, that ask them for permission to walk on the land, especially for da'wah, and that's what we're talking about, especially for da'wah purposes, because they have the strongest spiritual, whatever anyone else says, in my view, they have the strongest spiritual connection to this land. They understand the land. They respect the land. Whereas a lot of us, we just rape the resources from the land and want to benefit from it personally, and we don't really care about the land as long as we can live and you know. So that's, subhanAllah, alhamdulillah, that came in at that time, that we should be showing that respect. We should be showing, Muslim or non-Muslim, we should be showing that respect to elders. That if they say something, we should listen. Whether we follow or not follow is a different story. But we should listen to what they're saying, because that gives them their place in society. So as we were saying, when someone's 70, the retirement age, or 75, that's it. There has been, that's it, their time's over. But that's not how it is. They've had a lot of experience. They've seen things in life that we've never seen. They've got wisdom that we don't have. And so it's through the effort and the enthusiasm of the young people. It's from the athar, from the words they say, tribute to the Prophet of Allah, and through the wisdom and the counsel of the old people, that the deen goes forward. There's both those aspects, because young people are always enthusiastic, they want to go ahead, but wise people, the older people are wiser, they see things a little bit different. And even in that regard, for both of those two things, Al-Abbas, who knows who Al-Abbas Allah anhu is? We talked about him one time when we talked about the hijrah. He was the last person to make hijrah from Mecca to Medina. Who is he in relation to the Prophet of Allah alayhi salatu Sallu ala Rasulillah. Okay, he's the uncle. He's the paternal uncle, the of the Prophet of Allah alayhi salatu. One time he was asked, he said, they said, Man Akbar, who is bigger? You or Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam? And he said, Huwa akbaru minni walakin ana asannu minhu. He said that he is bigger than me. So that's the word, bigger. But I am more senior in age. So no one's bigger than. So there's a connotation in this hadith also that from position or status. So if someone has got a particular status, then we should anzil al-nas fi manazilihim, or kama qala alayhi salatu wasalam. That's one thing Aussie culture doesn't have, and we've spoken about it previously. Australian culture, for all the good things that it has in it, that everyone's just, no one's better than anyone, fair go, generally speaking. But Aussie culture doesn't have someone's got a position over someone else. No, we're all the same, and that's it, we're going to be all treated the same. But the Prophet said that, put people according to their status. According to their status, that's how you should treat people. And so, the kabir in this sense, or what does he say in English? Sorry, the elderly. Well, he's given a direct meaning from what was said before. That's the main meaning, elder and younger. But this is a different meaning, which is also correct meaning. So kabir, meaning those who have a high position, the muftis, the imams, also the people, the philanthropists. You know what a philanthropist is? Someone who's wealthy and gives money fi sabilillah, hopefully. Those types of people, judges. Like now, a while ago, we were at iftar and the judges were there. And then one of the judges asked me, he said, these guys, when we come in, they don't stand up. Is that part of your religion? I said, no, it's not. That's a non-scholarly tradition that these people have come up with. Of course we stand up. That's the position of that individual. That's the adab and the etiquette. We don't bow. I said, because you're also supposed to bow. I said, we only bow to Allah. But of course we stand up and we respect the judge. That's part of who we are. Of course we respect everyone with whatever customs they have, as long as it doesn't go against our faith. As long as it doesn't go against what's halal and what's haram in our tradition. So the kabir is that individual. That person who's got a station, they've got a special quality, a special skill, and they're kind of differentiated, you might say, from a regular person. And the saghir is the one who is the opposite of that. So if someone's the president, the premier, whatever the case might be, the prime minister, the CEO of the company, he doesn't come in, or she doesn't come and just give everyone a hard time. You have to have rahmah for those that are not on the same level, so to speak, as you. Does that make sense? So that's in age, that's the main meaning of the hadith, but there's also a connotation of status as well. So one's status, if one is on a more senior or whatever better status, then they should have mercy for those that aren't on that status, and the one sees someone who's on a more senior status, they should respect that person in that. And then, what's the rest of the hadith? وَيَأْمِرْ بِمَعْرُوفٍ وَيَنْهَى عَنْ مُنْكَرٍ. So, again, seminal part of our deen. Seminal meaning the major aspect of it. One of from like the spine of the deen, the backbone of the deen. Because, as Imam al-Haddad said, نَفَعَنَا بِهِ وَبِكُمْ رَضِي اللَّهُ عَنْهُ وَعَنْكُمْ, says that, what's the point of Allah sending the books and the revelation to the messengers or to the prophets if they weren't to spread it? That's their job. That's what they've been, that's what their vocation is. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent them for, to pass that message out. Alright? And he says, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأَمْرَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالنَّهْيُ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ فرض كفاية إذا قام به البعض سقط الحرج عن الباقين واختص الثواب بالقائمين به وإذا لم يقم به أحد عم الحرج كافة العالمين به القادرين على إزالته.
Know that enjoining good and forbidding evil is the collective obligation, fard kifaya, which if discharged by some is not incumbent upon the rest, and the reward being proper to those who discharged it. If no one does it, everyone who is aware of it and able to act is held responsible.
Alright? So now we get into the technical aspects of it. Imam Haddad was setting us up with the understanding of what it is, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said about it, what the Prophet of Allah ﷺ has said about it, some of the essences of it with regards to our deen. Where does it fit in according to Allah, enjoining good and dissuading evil? Where does it fit in with regards to our deen? Now we come to the umur al-hukmiyah, the rulings in terms of the sharia. What aspect of it does it come under? And he says that to enjoin good and dissuade evil, fardu kifayatin. So we've talked about fard kifaya. What are the things of fard kifaya, for example?
Washing the dead.
Alright, washing the dead. Yep. What else?
Praying 5 times.
That's fard ayn, mate. Got no choice at that one.
Praying in
Jummah as well, it's fard ayn. Praying in jama'ah, but right? Praying in jama'ah, in congregational prayer, عندما عند الشافعية مذهب Imam al-Shafi'i, that's fard kifaya. The adhan, and we've talked about all these things before, but maybe it's Friday, it's been a long week and the memory is not as strong as it should be, which is understandable on occasion. Okay, so and that's why the first verse that we said, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ. So there should be from amongst you an ummah, a portion, a big portion of the Muslims that call. That's where they get that ruling from. That ayah, that verse that we talked about a few weeks ago. Now, so if there's a portion of the Muslims, and it should be a big portion, if they're calling to Allah, if they're enjoining good and they're dissuading evil, then the ones who aren't doing it, they have no sin. And then, but he goes on, he says, فإذا قام البعض سقط الحرج عن الباقين واختص الثواب بالقائمين به. And the reward for doing so is limited. What is he saying in English?
The reward being proper to those who discharge them.
Right, so it's khas bihim. It's specific to those people who are actually doing it. So what he's saying is a difference. If nobody does, if a portion of the Muslims do it, and it should be a big portion, ummah, if a big portion of the Muslims enjoying good and forbid evil, then that's the communal obligation, which is what fard kifaya is taken care of. It's fulfilled. The communal obligation is fulfilled. But the reward is limited to those who are actually partaking in enjoining good and forbidding evil. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So, for example, let's say like 2 people in this class were doing the action. Are they the only ones who get the reward for helping the whole group?
Exactly right. So if there were however many in the class, if there was 2 of us just doing it, and the rest weren't, then the whole class wouldn't be sinful even if one person was doing it. No one in the class would be sinful with regards to enjoining good and forbidding evil. But only those ones would be they're the only ones that would be getting the reward. Not the whole class would be getting the reward. Right, so I want you to do that. That's what I want, inshallah azza wa jal. If things aren't clear, let me know, we'll clear it up. Because sometimes the language, is a bit, my language in particular. وإذا لم يقم به أحد عم الحرج كافة العالمين به القادرين على إزالته. So he also says that, so if no one does it, and we just, the same thing, so it's just repeating it really. What does he say in English, the last part?
No one does it, everyone who's aware of it and able to act is held responsible.
Right, so it's a little bit different because he says القادرين على إزالته. So the ones that have the capacity, they're in particular, so for example, we're in the class, whoever's been coming for a long time, whatever, knows what Imam Haddad's been talking about for 20 odd chapters. A bit different to someone who the first time they came today, they've never sat in a class of knowledge ever before, and their knowledge is very limited. So the people that have the most knowledge and the most understanding, unfortunately the haraj, the difficulty is on them more than those that don't. That's why the hadith says that the scholars yaktamun al-ilm, they don't, katam is they hold on to knowledge, they don't reveal knowledge. They wear a bridle of fire on the bridle what the horse wears, the bridle that goes into the mouth, and then the reins as well. So they wear a bridle of fire when I hold the Billah on the Day of Judgment, because knowledge doesn't belong to anybody. Just like the deen doesn't belong to anybody. It's the right of humanity and jinn kind, both, not just humanity. It's the right of the person who has it. And as Sayyidina Ali said, Allahumma arda anhu, he said, Karamallahu wajhu, he said that knowledge is better than money. Because the more you spend of money, the less you have. But the more you spend of your knowledge, the greater it gets. Whereas money, you need to guard it, but knowledge, it guards you. There's five qualities that he mentions. I forget the other ones, but they're the main ones. So whoever has that capacity, whoever has that knowledge, whoever has that understanding, whoever has that wisdom, they're the most responsible, and then it goes down. So, like we said last time about this, firstly, and we'll talk about it now anyway. Well, he says, وَالْوَاجِبُ عَلَيْكَ إِذَا رَأَيْتَ من يترك معروفا أو يفعل منكرا أن تعرفه بكون ذلك معروفا أو منكرا وإن لم يدعه فعليك بوعظه وتخويفه فإن لم ينجزر فعليك بتغييره وقهره بالضرب وكسر آلات اللهو المحرمة وإراقه الخمر ورد الأموال المغصوبة من يده إلى أربابها وهذه رتبة لا يستقل بها إلا من بذل نفسه لله أو كان مأذونا له من جهة السلطان.
Your duty when you see someone neglecting an act of goodness or committing an act of evil is to make him aware of the good or evil nature of the act, as the case may be. If he does not respond, you must counsel and put fear into him. If he is still not rebuked, then you must coerce him and even beat him and compel him to stop the evil he is engaged in, and break the forbidden instruments of distraction, pour away the wine, and restore illicit money to its rightful owners. This last degree is only for those who have either dedicated themselves wholly to God or are authorized delegates of the ruler.
Okay, so before we go to the beginning of the paragraph that we just started, we're going to go to the end. So that is for those who are in authority by the powers that be. You and I don't go around beating people and pouring out things and pouring out wine and restoring people's money that got stolen from one place to another. There's rules about that, citizens' arrests and things, but my advice is to stay away from all those things. It's quite technical, and you're going to get yourself into more trouble than you need to get into. So this is only specifically to those individuals if they've got a condition with Allah. But don't forget that what the Imam's talking about, doing these things, they were actually law in the land he was talking about it in. So in the Muslim lands, that's what whatever the Imam spoke in this paragraph, that's what the law is. So and the law was that if you did that, someone was drinking wine, you tipped it out, you don't, if it's a Muslim, if a Muslim's drinking wine and you tipped it out, you don't have to repatriate, or you don't have to remunerate, you don't have to compensate that person. If it's a non-Muslim, you have to compensate. If it's a non-Muslim and the treaty between the Muslims and those people in that land is that they can do that and it's part of their religion or part of their way of life, then you've got to pay. If you break the person's bottle of wine, as a Muslim, even under the Khalifa, under the rule, you've got to pay it back. You can't just go around breaking people's things. Okay, unless it's a Muslim, it's a different story. It's haram to drink wine, but that's only in the lands back in the day. Doesn't apply now. Doesn't apply now. Okay, but he's giving us an idea for us now. This is when this was written. It applied, of course, 300 odd years ago, but today it doesn't apply. So al-wajibu. So it's obligatory upon you. If you see someone who leaves something that is ma'ruf, all that good, so part of the sharia. So if someone leaves their prayers, they're not praying, for example. Someone doesn't dress appropriately, for example. Someone speaks inappropriately. Well, that's more the other way around. Someone misses their prayers, like we said, or they don't fast in the month of Ramadan, or any of these things that are good in our deen. They're not reading the Qur'an, they're not doing whatever. Then it's upon us to encourage them, and that's the main point. It's an encouraging thing. That's why we spoke about it we always speak about it, that the books that we should be reading aren't the books of halal and haram. We do that here, but the books we should be reading outside of the class are the books of fada'il al-a'mal, irad al-salihin, majjar al-rabih, At-Targhib At-Tarhib. These kind of books that, talk about if a person does something, what's the reward for doing that? And a person neglects to do something, what is the punishment for doing that? They're the types of things that we should be reading. Because especially in the society we live in a society of reward and punishment. Tell people they're going to get something good, they'll do it. Tell people that there's a detriment, generally they'll stay away from it, generally. And so it's even because we live in a consumer society where everyone wants rewards, something, rewards meaning not hasanat, not good deeds, but rewards, something tangible, material things, then it's a lot easier for people to come across. I always get people, if I do this, Sheikh, what's the reward of this? If someone does that, what's the punishment for that? Very often people ask those questions, very frequently. Alright, so that's the type of, if you really want to become a da'i, you want to become a caller to Allah, in my view, philosophy and all that about Islam is good, but not everyone's into it. The best two things are targhib, are encouragement, and stories. Stories of the pious people, in particular stories of the Prophet and ﷺ, and stories of the Sahaba and the pious people that came. People love stories. Why do people watch movies? Because it's a story. It's the same. And how about these TV shows? It's the same story every week. Like always the detective movies, It's the guy's a detective. Any one of the detective movies, the hundreds of them, that are on TV, it's the same story. There's a crime, the person comes along, no one else can solve it except the detective, and they solve it every week, and it goes on for like 20 seasons, and there's 20 years, 25 years. Every week it's the same plot. So in other words, different things happen, but it's the same story. Right? So people love a story. That's why movies are a maybe $1 trillion industry. I don't even know how big it is, but it's a huge industry. Novels, they're massive industries. Now it's all Stan and Netflix and whatever else. Now they're producing movies or shows just for those things. That's how huge it is, because we love a story. Allah knows that. He created us. That's why the Qur'an's full of stories. Full of stories to attract us. Full of stories to entice us. Full of stories to encourage us. So my recommendation is encourage people and tell stories. They're the two major things. People hear that, they're likely to think about changing their ways, inshallah azza wa jal. Okay? Yaf'al munkaran. So if someone, a'udhu billah, they're smoking cigarettes, they're smoking marijuana, they're drinking alcohol, they're hanging out with the wrong type of people, they want to get a tattoo, earrings for men, wearing jewelry for women, whatever tights, whatever the case might be, all those types of things, then it's incumbent upon you to speak about that. And again, in my view, in today's world, in a positive way. So, brother, that's not bad. It's better to do this. That's the prophetic way. I see what you're doing. It's better to do that. Because these days you can't tell anyone no. That's like the dirtiest word ever. Don't do that. That's wrong. What? Wrong? No. So then you're going to have what? Conflict. You don't want to have conflict. And then it's going to be, Sahih Hadith. Not Sahih Hadith. Who said? Which madhab? I don't believe in madhabs. Or whatever. I read it this. Well, you don't need that. Once it turns to argumentation, my advice is, walk away. Walk away. Don't argue. Don't argue. That's not the way of the people of Allah anyway. The way of the people of Allah is, as we read last week or the week before, لا ينتهون عن منكر فعلوه. Right?
كانوا لا ينهون.
كان لا يتناهون. That's from the ayah. عن منكر فعلوه. So, if you want people to start doing something, you got to do it yourself. Hassan al-Basri, right? He was the Imam. They said, Imam, there was too many slaves. Do a khutbah. He was Imam in Iraq. They say one of the best of the tabi'een that would come after the Sahaba. They said, do a khutbah. The people started emancipating, letting free their slaves. And then 1 year later, did the khutbah. And that day, everyone just started letting their slaves go. And then the people that asked him, they said, Imam, we asked you, 1 year ago, why did you wait 1 year to do the khutbah? He said, because I didn't have enough money to buy a slave, so I saved up the money, then I bought the slave, then I used the slave to know what it's like to have a slave to work for you. Then I let the slave go to know what it's like to let the slave go, to emancipate. Then I did the khutbah. So in reality, if you want people to do good, you have to embody it. They say lisan al-hal arjahu wa aqwa min lisan al-maqal. The tongue of your state, so to speak, and your condition is much more clearer and much stronger than the tongue of your mouth, the tongue that produces words. So your state and your condition, that should be da'wah. That should be what encourages people to do good. That's what should dissuade people from doing evil. In the first essence, not to say you don't use your tongue, of course you do. But in essence, if you don't have that embodiment in your body, that urge, that drive, that enthusiasm, that compassion, that love, your da'wah will, no matter how eloquent a speaker you are, it will have very limited effect. In the end, it's up to Allah who decides. يهدي من يشاء يدل من يشاء إنك لم تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء. Allah guides who He wills, misguides who He wills. It's up to Allah. And then Allah said to the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you cannot guide those whom which you love. Allah guides who He wishes, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the other key of da'wah. It's not up to you. It doesn't matter how awesome your speech is and all these things. It doesn't make a difference. Allah decides what He wills. And that's what should keep us humble when we call to Allah. Rather than thinking we're better than other people, or that we've got a station that other people haven't got with Allah Ta'ala, which is, that'll destroy a person's da'wah. So if someone's doing something wrong, do what you can to dissuade them. Firstly, by letting them know. Because some people don't know. Right? Some people don't know. So, from our mashayikh, we learnt that the way to do that is to be on the same level as the people. If you're going to come from on top, people are going to be like, who's this bloke? What's going on here? Who's he to tell me what to do? Who's she to tell me what to do? So if you try and come from above, it's not going to work. You have to be on the same level, and that's empathy. If you don't have empathy for the people, like we said, that should be our first step in any time we deal with any other creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. Empathy, sympathy, mercy. If you don't have that, and if you're saying it, just to say it because I'm better than someone, then it's not going to have no effect. It's going to be the opposite effect. The reason that you should be telling people that that's good or otherwise, in other words, enjoining good or forbidding evil, is because of love. Is because you want the best for that other individual. Not because you say, I know, I've been going to class for 3-4 years. I know what I'm on about, you know what I mean? I've got a direct connection, I'm somebody. If that happens with al-Billah, your da'wah is going to have zero effect with al-Billah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِن لَمْ يَدَعْهُ فَعَلَيْكَ بِوَعْدِهِ وَالتَّخْوِيفِ. So that if the person doesn't stops doing it, in other words, doesn't continue doing the good thing, or continues doing the bad thing, then you've got to turn up the heat, so to speak, if that's the case. And so that's from the prophetic traditions. That's from the halal and haram. That's from the punishment if someone keeps doing something bad. And that's from the rewards, and to encourage someone to do something good. So if one of your friends or associates or whatever doesn't pray, then you've got to know how to talk to that person. You've got to, and prayer in its essence is al-Haddad al-Khudu' lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they don't know Allah, it's going to be very difficult for them. If they don't have a connection to Allah, it's going to be very difficult for them to pray. So the tajleed, the magnification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and exalting Allah, so the person starts to understand how the role of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in one's life, then once that's there in their mind and in their heart, then inshallah that road, the iman builds in, and inshallah that road to prayer will come, inshallah. And vice versa, with dissuading evil, that if the person understands that Allah created them, Allah gave them all the things that He gave him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the world the way it works just for our benefit, so we can know Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we can worship Him, then a person is less likely to contravene the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of respect and reverence for Allah. And that's the essence of it. That's the essence of the whole thing. The more you can connect someone to Allah, then they're right to go. But if you're going to be every time around, don't do this, don't do that, and you're only worried about the actual actions themselves, the effect is going to be minimal. So that's why the job of the ulama al-arifin, those who know Allah, the scholars, their job is to put as much as possible, the love and the immensity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hearts of the servants of Allah. Once that's there, they're going to do everything that's good, and inshallah they're going to stay away from evil. That's what we're all working on. We're trying to get to that stage where the love of Allah is greater than the love of ourselves, where the love of Allah is greater than the love of status. The love of Allah is greater than the love of money. The love of Allah is greater than the love of our whims and our fancies doing what we want rather than Allah. That's the essence of it. So if we can work on that with people rather than saying, oh bro, do this and don't do that, then it becomes a different scenario. It changes the what we're trying to do. So the first one is wa'adh wa takhweef. So that, mate, we're going to burn in the hellfire as the most fearful thing. And today with science, you can even talk about the fears that, for example, if someone smokes cigarettes, mate, it's cancer, people's toes fall off and they get gangrene and all the other cancers that people know about. That's why they call them cancer sticks. People who smoke them call them cancer sticks. So that's the takhweef as well. In the world, even now they're coming out saying that alcohol, there's 7 different types of cancer that the alcohol causes. So there's the things you can use as well in this world as well as the next world. فَإِنْ لَمْ يَنْجَزِرْ. So if the person doesn't decease, فَعَلَيْكَ بِتَغْيِيرِهِ وَقَهْرِهِ بِالضَّرْبِ وَكَسْرِ آلَاتِ اللَّهُ. So if you were in charge, or you were authorized by the sovereignty, in other words, whichever law rules in that area, then you can beat that person. And in Saudi, I remember a lot of people telling me, back in the 80s, that all the workers used to go from different countries. They never used to pray. So when the adhan used to come, a guy used to come with a massive stick, and then whoever wasn't going to the masjid, they'll cop a beating. That's how it was. I don't think that's the right way to do it, but that's how they used to do it. That's how things used to go back then. If someone was eating openly in Ramadan, they used to cop a beating, or they would get put in jail. That's how things used to be. There's dar al-ta'a. If a husband wasn't doing the right thing, wasn't giving his right, or bayt al-ta'a, if wasn't giving his right to his wife, they'd lock him up. Or a wife wasn't giving her right to a husband, they'd lock him up until they wake up to themselves. وَكَسْرَ آلَاتِ اللَّهُ الْمُحَرَّمَةِ. So, I don't know, man. I think all the alat we have today are alat lahu. Allahu alim. All the contraptions and the devices we have that just waste time, lahu, they should be broken. Unfortunately, we got a lot of contraptions and devices that are just time wasting. Misfortunately, unfortunately. So, you have to think about that in your own life. You know, what things is it that you use? And back in the days, it was like, zmamir, whistles and things. Now it's, all sorts of fandangled electronic gadgets that people spend all their time on, wasting their time. And also, all the aspects, what did you say? Iraqatul khamr? About the wine?
Pour away the wine.
Okay. So, if someone's drinking, back in the day as well, they would get put in prison, and there's lashings. If someone's drinking alcohol, they cop the 80 lashings. وَرَدُّ أَمْوَالِ الْمَغْصُوبَةِ. So, if someone takes money forcefully, gangsters and armed robbery and all that, if you're the one, you're part of the government, you're the police force or the detectives or CIA, whatever it is, you're part of that, ATF, then your job is to get that money back and return it to its rightful owners. So we said that's only specific. وهذه الرتبة لا يستقل بها إلا من بذل نفسه لله. So the person, what is it in English, that part, sorry?
This last degree is only for those who have either dedicated themselves wholly to God or authorized of the delegates of the ruler.
Right, so in the Muslim lands, there are some people that's their station, that's their wilayah. That Allah has given them that thing that they go around and call people, but it's a specific thing. It's a specific thing for a specific time. It doesn't really apply. For us, it's the ruler. If the ruler has authorized you to do, like we said, give parking tickets or whatever, you know, like those RTA guys that make sure that trucks aren't overloaded and whatever else it might be. Standards, if you work in a work cover, for example, that's a good example. They go to the work sites and make sure things are safe. If that's your job, do it properly. Don't take $10 on the side or whatever, it's more than 10,000 on the side to, you know, so don't worry about the standards, or don't worry about this because that's I'm getting my own personal benefit, or they take you out to dinner, or they look after you, or whatever, they say nice things about you, or whatever the case might be. Whatever job you've been given, and that includes don't lie, right? If your job is to do something, get it done. If within the scope of your job you've got discretion and you can decide to prosecute or not prosecute, that's different. But to go outside the bounds of your portfolio, in other words, what your job is, that's haram. أو كان مأذونا له من جهة، we said that. وأما الرتبتان الأوليتان أعني التعريف والوعظ فلا يقصر عنهما إلا جاهل مخبث أو عالم مفرط.
The first two degrees, which are the appraisal of things as good or evil and counseling, are only neglected by confused, ignorant people or scholars who are inadequate.
Right? So the first part of it that we spoke about, the letting people know what's good and they should do it, and the letting people know what's bad to stay away from it, and the encouragement for people to do good, and the discouragement for people to not do good, to stay away from evil things, that's upon everybody. Except someone who is what does he say, jahil, a confused, ignorant person, then what? He's confused, ignorant, what are you going to do? Alright, or alim mufarrit, what does he say about the scholar?
Inadequate scholar.
Mufarrit, yeah. It's a bit more that the tafrit is like they're incompetent. So if a scholar is an incompetent scholar, they won't get into it. And unfortunately, you know, the government scholars and these guys, that's what they're like. It's a post to be the mufti of a country. It's a political post, not a really religious post. So they're not really into it. They don't really care about it. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأَمْرَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ واجب والنهي عن محرم واجب والأمر بمندب والنهي عن منكره مستحب.
Know that enjoining obligatory and forbidding prohibited things is itself an obligation. Enjoining recommended and forbidding disliked things is itself recommended.
Okay? Again we go to the hukm of things. What's the ruling of this and what's the ruling of that? So, if something is farad to perform, if it's farad for you to perform something, let's say salat, and someone's not doing their salat, then it's farad for you to let them know. Then it's farad for you to let them know. It's an obligation for you to let them know that that's an obligation. Fasting, right? Someone doesn't know that an obligation, it's farad in Ramadan to fast. They're a new Muslim. They haven't been around Muslims. Whatever the case might be. And you see them eating in Ramadan, right? For a woman it's different because there's times that a female doesn't have to eat. But for a man, and he might be a traveller or he might be sick, so you ascertain whether that's the case because the excuse is the first port of call. The excuse is then, oh brother, are you travelling from outside? Come to me, you know, whatever. No, are you sick? No. Oh look brother, you know, I know this. I don't know much about my faith. I know a little bit. I heard from someone that, you know, fasting, it's an obligation. Everyone's got to do it, you know. And if you don't, today, that's it. The best thing to do is not eat from now on because I told you, now it's an obligation upon you. It's a fard upon you. If you're going to continue eating, which is haram again, if you're going to continue doing that, then look, don't do it on the street in front of people. It's, like I said, in a Muslim scenario. In a Muslim scenario. Not in our society. I'm just giving you an idea so that you know. So that the person understands and you understand. Then if someone's doing something haram, they're in the middle of the street in a Muslim country where everyone's Muslim, they're drinking alcohol. Ascertain, is the person Muslim? Yes, they're Muslim. Is it being prescribed by a doctor? Muslim doctor who's Ameen? Unlikely to be in the middle of the street. But you've got to ask that question anyway. You've got to make sure, brother, you're sick, be prescribed? No? Look, you know, we know that it's haram to drink alcohol, whatever. Better to do it away from the street, take them away from the street. Now.
So it's followed in every scenario, like whatever a person is doing is haram, you have to always advise them?
You have to advise. At least advise. Okay, whatever circumstance you're in, and it'll talk about, there are some excuses for it. There are some times if your life's going to be threatened and all these types of things, you know, or if the people, we'll talk, there are exceptions, but generally the rule is that if someone's doing something that's haram, it's an obligation for you, it's also fard upon you to tell them, a Muslim, right? And if someone is leaving something that's a fard, a Muslim, then you've got to tell them as well that you can't leave that, that's an obligation in our faith. Just let them know. Okay? And then the sunnah things. If someone, for example, for the men, the tib, the atar, someone comes and they're smelling of burgers or curry or something like that, whatever, laham mishwa, and they come into the mosque, then it's sunnah for you to tell them that, look, you know, the mosque is the place of angels. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Thiyabaka fatahir," make sure your clothes are pure, and then we're all meeting together and we want to try and concentrate on Allah rather than, you know, not be overwhelmed by a gross smell. So it's sunnah in that situation to tell someone about a sunnah. Yeah? Or it's sunnah it's also sunnah to warn someone about a munkar. Going back to the mosque, they fill their mouth up, you're having lunch with someone, they're just ripping the onions and the garlic, raw onion and raw garlic, the whole lunch, and then they go, oh, let's go pray in the masjid, and let's go pray Lord in the masjid. Then it's sunnah to tell them, brother, it's makruh to go to the mosque and pray in the mosque if you've been eating in the congregation, that means, while you've been eating raw garlic and raw onion. Why is it makruh here, reckon?
Because it stinks.
Exactly right, because it stinks. You don't want your stank mouth going in there and distracting people from concentrating on Allah. So if that was the case, you'd wait till the congregation's been done and then go after, do your prayers because you've got fard anyway, and then continue. That's the sunnah. It's sunnah to do that. So wherever the commandment is sunnah, it's sunnah to call upon that person to do it. Wherever it's an obligation to call. Wherever the act that has to be done, or that act that should be stayed away from is an obligation, then it's an obligation upon you to also let that person know. Says, وعليك إذا أمرت بمعروف أو نهيت عن منكر ولم يسمع لك بمفارقة موضع المنكر وهجر مرتكبي حتى يفيء إلى أمر الله.
Whenever you enjoin good or forbid evil and are not listened to, you must leave the place where evil is being committed and those who commit it, until they return to God's ordinance.
And in my view, that's the best way for you to do da'wah. That's the best way, because we live in a society whether it's a really confusing, if you ask me, it's a confusing society.